It's June 1940. The world is standing on the brink of a new dark age. Hitler's war machine, a seemingly unstoppable force, has crushed Europe under the weight of its blitzkrieg. Country after country has fallen. Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, and now France. The one nation that was supposed to hold the line on the continent was on the verge of total collapse. As the last boats struggled away from the beaches of Dunkirk and the swastika was ready to fly over Paris, Britain stood utterly, terrifyingly alone. The full might of Hitler's empire was about to be turned on this one small island. As the world held its breath, one man, only weeks into his premiership, stepped up to prepare his nation for the ultimate test of survival. And for what he would call its finest hour, to really get the sheer gravity of June 18, 1940, we have to understand the catastrophe that came right before it. The Battle of France wasn't a battle. It was a total rout. German panzers had simply gone around the mighty Maginot Line, slicing through the Ardennes forest, a move the Allied command had thought was impossible. The British Expeditionary Force, along with its French and Belgian allies, was quickly surrounded, their backs pushed right up to the sea at the port of Dunkirk. What happened next wasn't a victory, but a miracle born from pure desperation. Codenamed Operation Dynamo. A flotilla of over 800 vessels, ranging from naval destroyers to civilian fishing boats and pleasure yachts, set out across the English Channel to rescue the stranded army. Under constant fire from the German Luftwaffe, they plucked soldier after soldier from the harbor and the beaches. Churchill had hoped to save 50,000 men. In the end, against all odds, nearly 340,000 Allied soldiers were evacuated. But this miracle of Dunkirk couldn't hide the terrifying reality. It was, as Churchill himself admitted, a colossal military disaster. Britain had its army back, but they'd left behind almost all of their heavy equipment, tanks, artillery, and transport. The rescued soldiers were exhausted, disarmed, and in no shape to repel an invasion. And an invasion now seemed all but certain. German troops marched into an undefended Paris on June 14th. Just 2 days later, the French government, now led by Marshal Pétain, formally asked Germany for an armistice. Britain was alone. The strategic situation was beyond dire. The island nation now faced an enemy that dominated the continent, an enemy with more troops, a proven strategy, and all the momentum of victory. The question hung heavy in the London air. What now? For many, the answer seemed logical, if agonizing: negotiate. Even inside Churchill's own war cabinet, there was immense pressure to seek terms. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Halifax, thought it was wise to use Mussolini as a go-between to see what kind of peace deal Hitler might offer. Too many, fighting on looked like suicide. This was the problem laid at the feet of Winston Churchill, a man who had become Prime Minister only 5 weeks earlier, man distrusted by many in his own party and seen by some as a reckless warmonger. The stage was set for a battle, not of guns, but of will and words. When Churchill stood up to speak in the House of Commons on June 18th, He was facing three big challenges. He had to explain the recent military failures without pointing fingers. He had to toughen up the resolve of his own wavering government. And he had to prepare the British people for a struggle that he knew would demand everything from them. This would be the third in a trio of incredible speeches he'd given since taking office. Following his blood, toil, tears and sweat promise, and his defiant "we shall fight on the beaches" vow. He didn't start with soaring rhetoric, but with a calm, almost surgical, review of the military situation. He acknowledged the disastrous military events, but refused to get into the blame game, stressing that unity was what mattered now. He methodically explained why more British fighter squadrons hadn't been sent to France, arguing that the defense of Britain itself had to come first. It was a logical, almost businesslike assessment meant to show he had a firm grip on reality, not that he was lost in some delusion. He laid out the facts, assuring Parliament that Britain still had a powerful military and that his professional advisors all agreed the war must go on. With that logical foundation set, Churchill began to build his case for defiance. He skillfully wove in emotional appeals, grounding the coming fight in the very soul of the British people. He knew he wasn't just talking to politicians. He was talking to the grocer, the factory worker, the farmer. That evening, he would repeat the speech in a broadcast to the nation, so his words had to be both powerful and plain. Churchill was a master of rhetoric, and he used every tool he had. He framed the stakes in stark black and white terms. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free. But if we fail, then the whole world will sink into the abyss of a new dark age. That contrast between sunlit uplands and the abyss left no room for a middle ground. It was a choice between liberty and total subjugation. He used vivid, almost terrifying imagery, warning of a tyranny made more sinister, and perhaps more prolonged by the lights of a perverted science. This wasn't just a war against another country. It was a war against a twisted ideology. He drove his message home with rhythm and repetition, a technique he'd famously used when he vowed, "We shall fight ... creating a powerful cadence of resolve. The final iconic passage of his speech was even laid out like poetry in his notes, showing his deep love for history and grand language. He spoke his famous words, "Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour." In that one sentence, he gave the struggle meaning. He turned the dread of invasion into a privilege of duty. He told the people of Britain that their suffering wouldn't be for nothing, that their courage would be remembered for a millennium. It was a masterful move, turning a moment of extreme danger into a moment of extreme honor. So, how did the speech actually land? Well, it was complicated. In the House of Commons, it was met with approval. But among the general public, the reaction was more mixed. Mass observation diaries from the time showed that some people found his tone too grim, while others even suspected he'd been drinking. For many, His warning that Britain might have to fight on alone was a sobering and scary thought, not some invigorating call to arms. But Churchill wasn't trying to sell false hope. He was building credibility by speaking hard truths, managing expectations, and steeling the population for the ordeal ahead. He was rousing the nation not with empty slogans, but with a clear-eyed look at the danger, paired with an unshakable belief that they could overcome it. The phrase "their finest hour" immediately became a national motto, a symbol of defiance. Most importantly, the speech shut down the debate within his government. By taking such a public and uncompromising stand, Churchill made any more talk of negotiation politically impossible. He had committed the nation to the fight. Now, those defiant words had to be matched by defiant deeds. The speech was the psychological prelude to the battle that was just around the corner, the Battle of Britain. The abyss he spoke of took the form of German bombers in the skies over southern England. The duty he called for was answered by the pilots of the Royal Air Force, the few who scrambled every day to meet the onslaught. It was answered by the factory workers who built the Spitfires and Hurricanes, and by the civilians on the ground who endured the Blitz with a toughness that amazed the world. The Battle of Britain was the physical proof of the spirit Churchill laid out on June 18th. It was the nation living up to the challenge he had given them. They proved Hitler could be stopped. Churchill's speech didn't win the battle, but it forged the mindset needed to fight it. It armed the British people with a story of a small island, standing alone, defending civilization in its darkest hour. The power of words to shape history is a huge part of the Second World War. If you're interested in another story of defiance against all odds, make sure to check out our documentary on the Warsaw Uprising. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell for more historical reconstructions that bring these crucial moments back to life. Winston Churchill's finest hour speech wasn't just a political address. It was an act of leadership that defined a nation's character. In a little over half an hour, he transformed a moment of catastrophic defeat into a call for heroic endurance. By preparing his people for their ultimate test of survival, he ensured that when history looked back, that summer of 1940 would forever be remembered as their finest hour.